Hi everyone, I'm Rosie and welcome back to my channel. What I'm about to share with you literally shook me to my core. It might be controversial and I can't promise you'll see the same results, but I wanted to share my personal experience. I've been getting questions about how I created my starter, and honestly, I've been a bit embarrassed to answer that I technically didn't make it from scratch. A few years ago, I made my starter from raw sourdough that I mixed with some flour and water. I just fed it twice a day for about 2 to 3 days, and it was a fully functioning starter after that. I decided to challenge myself by making my own starter, but I wanted to do it in my own loosey-goosey way. I didn't want to weigh or measure anything precisely, and I didn't want to waste any discard or flour. I'm still traumatized from the pandemic flour shortage, so I'm not about to do that. This strategy goes against everything everyone tells you about how to make a starter. Most of the videos out there give you exact grams of flour and water, a precise feeding schedule that would make any tiger mom proud, and such a controlled temperature setting that some even suggest using a proofing box. I threw all those rules out the window and set off on my own starter journey. You can make starter from any type of grain flour, but I'm using dark rye flour because of its high amount of nutrients and reported high level of natural yeast. I want to avoid discarding, so I started off with just 2 tablespoons of rye flour. I added about 2 tablespoons of filtered water. It looked a bit dry, so I added about another tablespoon of water. This consistency was more watery than my normal starter, but I figured that was fine to get the process started. I covered it loosely with a jar lid and let it sit at room temperature. At this time, it looked pretty much the same as the day before and just smelled like flour. I added 2 tablespoons of flour and 2 tablespoons of water. This gave me the same thick pancake batter-like consistency as my normal starter. I'll link my video on how I maintain my starter with no discard in the description. By the afternoon, I started to see some bubbles. And then by the evening, the bubbles increased and I figured I better put on a rubber band to track progress. It started to smell a bit nuttier, but not sour yet this day. By the next morning, it basically doubled in volume. This was a total surprise, and I decided to do a float test. The starter smelled slightly sour, but really more musty. I would have tried baking with it at this time, but I only had a tiny amount of starter, so I ended up feeding it more and waiting. I add 4 tablespoons of flour and about 3 to 4 tablespoons of water to get that thick pancake batter consistency again. About 4.5 hours later, it nearly doubled in volume. By the evening, it tripled in volume. I really didn't expect this much activity, and I decided to make some dough. After I mixed the dough, I fed the starter. I added 3 tablespoons of flour instead of 4 because of how much it increased in volume last time. I mixed in about 3 tablespoons of water and let it sit loosely covered overnight. By day 4, the starter smelled fresh and tangy, like a cut tomato, but still less sour than my old starter. Compared to my veteran starter, this one was still more active, which was expected at this stage. Now, back to the bread. It completely surprised me that I could make dough on day 3 of my starter journey that would turn into amazing bread. It was incredibly delicious. It was less sour than my normal sourdough, and it tasted sweeter, almost like honey whole wheat bread. Although there wasn't as much oven spring as I normally get, I'm really happy with this loaf. I wouldn't consider this starter mature, but it does a surprisingly good job baking bread, so I just put it in the fridge and will bake with it weekly just like I do with my old starter. I'd love to hear what you think about my starter journey and whether your experience was similar or completely different. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe for more easy cooking and baking videos, and say hi in the comments. Thanks for joining me today, and I'll see you next time. Bye!